10 Most Scandalous and Shocking Facts About John Lewis. John Lewis was not only a towering figure of the civil rights movement but also a transformative politician and activist whose life was marked by relentless struggle, personal sacrifice, and historic milestones. His career, which spanned decades, saw him confront systemic racism, participate in pivotal civil rights actions, and later become a revered congressman. However, Lewis's journey was not without controversy and shocking moments, highlighting the complexity of his legacy. Fact number 1. A childhood preaching to chickens. John Robert Lewis was born on February 21, 1940, near Troy, Alabama, to sharecroppers Eddie and Willie Mae Lewis, who raised him and his 9 siblings on a small farm. From a young age, Lewis dreamed of becoming a Baptist minister, often preaching to chickens in the yard. "Some of those chickens listened better than people I've preached to," he later joked. Growing up under Jim Crow segregation, Lewis attended segregated schools and experienced racism and poverty firsthand. Inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s radio sermons and the growing civil rights movement, Lewis saw activism as his true calling, despite his parents urging him to avoid trouble. "When you see something that's not right, not fair, not just, you have to speak up," he would later say. In 1968, Lewis married Lillian Miles, a librarian from Los Angeles, and they adopted a son, John Miles Lewis. Lillian supported his career throughout their marriage, which lasted until her death in 2012. Though Lewis's demanding activism often kept him away, he cherished his family, calling Lillian his anchor and John Miles his inspiration. Number 2. Secret defiance against his family's wishes. After graduating high school, Lewis attended the American Baptist Theological Seminary in Nashville, Tennessee, where he pursued his dream of becoming a minister. But Lewis soon realized that his calling extended beyond the pulpit. He was drawn to activism. His parents, fearing the dangers of challenging segregation, begged him to avoid protests. "They thought activism would bring trouble to our family," Lewis recalled, "but I had to act. I couldn't sit back and let things stay the same." Despite his parents' fears, Lewis secretly began organizing protests with fellow students. At age 20, he participated in his first sit-ins at downtown Nashville lunch counters, which refused to serve black patrons. Trained in the methods of nonviolent resistance, Lewis faced verbal abuse, physical attacks, and arrests. His first arrest came in February 1960, during a sit-in at Woolworth's. "It was scary," Lewis admitted, "but it felt like I was finally doing what I was born to do." This early defiance set the tone for the rest of his life. He would be arrested more than 40 times for his activism, never wavering from his commitment to justice, no matter the personal cost. Number 3. Brutal beating on Bloody Sunday. The Selma to Montgomery March on March 7, 1965, now known as Bloody Sunday, marked one of the darkest and most defining moments in Lewis's life. The march, intended to demand voting rights for African Americans, began with over 600 peaceful protesters crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. At just 25 years old, Lewis led the marchers alongside Reverend Hosea Williams. As the group reached the middle of the bridge, they encountered a line of Alabama state troopers and local lawmen. Ignoring orders to disperse, the marchers were attacked with clubs, whips, and tear gas. Lewis was beaten so severely that his skull was fractured. "I thought I was going to die on that bridge," Lewis later said, recalling the brutality he endured. Despite his injury, he refused to abandon the marchers and was among the last to retreat. Television coverage of the violent crackdown horrified the nation and spurred widespread support for the Voting Rights Act, which President Lyndon B. Johnson signed into law on August 6, 1965. For the rest of his life, Lewis bore scars from the assault on the bridge, a painful reminder of the price he paid for justice. Number 4. Criticism from Malcolm X and SNCC militants. In 1963, Lewis became the youngest chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, at just 23 years old. During his tenure, SNCC organized some of the most significant actions of the civil rights movement, including the freedom rides and voter registration efforts in the Deep South. However, not everyone within the movement agreed with Lewis's commitment to nonviolence. By the mid-1960s, figures like Malcolm X and Stokely Carmichael began advocating for more militant approaches. Malcolm X famously criticized Lewis's reliance on peaceful protests, remarking, "The ballot is like a bullet, you don't throw it away." Tensions within SNCC grew as activists debated whether nonviolence was enough to bring lasting change. In 1966, Carmichael replaced Lewis as SNCC chairman, marking a shift towards the Black Power movement. Reflecting on these internal divisions, Lewis said, "We may have disagreed on tactics, but we shared the same goal, freedom." His resignation from SNCC leadership marked the end of an era, but his faith in peaceful resistance never wavered, even when it left him isolated from some former allies. Number 5. Losing and winning the battle for Congress. Lewis's foray into electoral politics was met with challenges. In 1977, he made his first run for Georgia's 5th congressional district, but he lost to Weishfowler. Though disappointed, Lewis remained active in public service, determined to make another attempt. Nearly a decade later, in 1986, he ran for the same seat, facing off against his old friend and fellow civil rights activist, Julian Bond. The primary campaign quickly turned bitter, with personal attacks exchanged between the two. Bond accused Lewis of lacking legislative experience, while Lewis implied that Bond's alleged drug use made him unfit for office. "We fought hard," Lewis later said, "but in the end, we knew what was at stake." Lewis emerged victorious, securing the Democratic nomination and winning the general election. His election to Congress launched a 33-year political career, during which he became known as the conscience of Congress for his moral leadership and unwavering support for civil rights. Number 6. Forgiving the unforgivable. In 1979, former Alabama Governor George Wallace, known for his infamous pro-segregation stance, approached Lewis seeking forgiveness. Wallace's resistance to civil rights had left deep scars, but Lewis's response was rooted in his philosophy of reconciliation. "I had to forgive him. To hate him would only perpetuate the evil system." Despite the personal pain Wallace had caused, Lewis's willingness to forgive symbolized his lifelong commitment to healing and unity. His public reconciliation with Wallace was a testament to his belief in the power of forgiveness over hatred. Number 7. A controversial friendship with Republicans. Though a lifelong Democrat, Lewis was known for reaching across the aisle to work with Republicans on civil rights issues. One of his most surprising allies was President George W. Bush, who awarded Lewis the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2011. Lewis also led bipartisan pilgrimages to Selma each year, inviting Republican leaders, including Senator Mitch McConnell and Jeff Sessions, to walk with him across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. While these efforts fostered rare moments of unity, they also sparked criticism from some Democrats, who saw his cooperation with conservatives as a betrayal of progressive ideals. Number 8. The Voter Education Project and Political Intrigue. In the 1970s, Lewis served as director of the Voter Education Project, VP, which aimed to register African American voters across the South. His efforts contributed significantly to Jimmy Carter's victory in the 1976 presidential election, which relied heavily on black voter turnout. Ironically, despite his pivotal role, Lewis's relationship with the Carter administration deteriorated, exposing the fickle nature of political alliances. In politics, loyalty is often the first casualty, Lewis later reflected. Number 9. Public warning against the Supreme Court. In 2005, Lewis testified before the Senate, warning that John Roberts, nominated to the Supreme Court, would undermine civil rights. His fears were realized in 2013 when Roberts authored the decision in Shelby County v. Holder, gutting the Voting Rights Act. The ruling paved the way for restrictive voter ID laws across the South, undoing much of the progress Lewis had fought for. Number 10. A poignant legacy in the 2020 election. In a poetic twist, Clayton County, once part of Lewis's congressional district, played a key role in flipping Georgia for Joe Biden in the 2020 presidential election. Lewis had passed away on July 17, 2020, but his life's work resonated powerfully in the election, symbolizing the enduring impact of his fight for voting rights.